Hello everyone, welcome again to my channel. Thanks for the click. I hope you are doing well. So as you can see, starting from this episode, we are going to cover some lessons that have to do with the teaching profession or teaching job, and this is very important for novice teachers and also those teachers or future teachers, those who want to apply for the teaching profession either in public or in private sector. So if you go back again, or if you go through my channel, you will come across a lot of lessons and episodes related to the teaching job or the teaching profession. Okay, so as you can see, today we are going to cover teaching vocabulary, something that we did not see before. So when we talk about vocabulary, this is something very important for language learning and teaching. So learners always pay attention a lot to vocabulary, and all of them try and want and aim to have an inventory and a repertoire of vocabulary, and they like to have a lot of vocabulary. So you as a teacher, your job is to help learners to develop a lot this inventory and this repertoire of vocabulary. So when we talk about teaching vocabulary, you have to distinguish it as a particular lesson. You have to distinguish it from what we call pre-teaching vocabulary. Okay, pre-teaching vocabulary. Okay, so you have to distinguish teaching vocabulary as a particular lesson from pre-teaching vocabulary. Pre-teaching vocabulary most of the time, if not always, is related to reading. Okay, is related to reading when you present, when you pre-teach some essential vocabulary that will help learners understand and comprehend the text. Okay, so this is what we mean by pre-teaching vocabulary, when you focus, as I said, on the most important terms or words in the text and you present them, you pre-teach them in order to help learners understand and comprehend the text better. Okay, so this is what we mean by pre-teaching vocabulary. Today we are not going to talk about pre-teaching vocabulary, but we are going to talk about teaching vocabulary as a lesson. Okay, all right, but in this episode, we are not going to talk about steps or stages to teach vocabulary, but we are going to talk about one particular important stage, which is presenting vocabulary. So let's start with the first way. So using pictures is one way, very essential way to present vocabulary. So if pictures are everywhere, internet, etc. So you can use pictures to present, for example, vocabulary, as I said. So for example, if you are teaching jobs, so you can say, for instance, if you show them this picture, this is a waiter. So this is a way to present vocabulary. So this is a waiter, for example. Or you can say also, this is a smart watch, okay, if you are teaching smart watch, okay, or this is a bracelet or a smart bracelet, for example. If you are teaching gadgets in general, so you can use pictures, okay. So pictures is a way, one way to present vocabulary, and pictures help learners to remember the words because they see the object that you are talking about. Okay, another very essential way to present vocabulary is the so-called realia. And when I say realia means to bring real objects, okay, to bring real object to classroom, okay, to bring real object to classroom. For example, we can say this is a bottle of water, so this is a real object, okay, it's not a picture, it's not just a word or anything else, so this is a real object. Okay, you can also say this is a smartphone, for example, this is a smartphone, so this is a real object if you are teaching. So realia is very essential. What distinguishes realia from pictures, okay, is that when you bring realia to classroom, learners remember the word, okay. So when you show them the real object, students will never forget the term or will never forget the word, okay? So it really helps learners remember the words, okay? Number 3, context, okay? The context. And when I say the context better to be a short dialogue, okay? Or a short exchange between two students. You can also present them in the form of sentences, for example, sentences, okay? Or why not in a short text, for example, in a short text or paragraphs, okay? So these are examples of context that you can use to present the vocabulary, okay? So the context helps learners to see and notice and observe the term or vocabulary you are presenting, okay? Especially if you are using those words in bold, for example, or underlined, etc. So this is a way, the context. So students read the dialogue or sentence or the text. Now, what you have to keep in mind is that the complexity of these elements, dialogues, sentences, and text depends on the level of the learners, the levels of your learners. If you are teaching, for example, beginners, the dialogue should be short and simple. The sentences should be also simple and short. Text the same, all right? Not like teaching, for instance, advanced learners or maybe intermediate or upper intermediate learners, okay? So these contexts differ according to the learners. All right, number 4, drawing. Especially if you are good at drawing on the board, okay? Sometimes you don't have pictures, you don't have realia, but if you have this skill of drawing, it's very great thing, right? So drawing on the board, for example, if you draw something like that, this means that you are perhaps drawing a kind of mountains, all right? If you are drawing something like that, means that you are drawing a kind of perhaps house, etc. So I am not good at drawing, and most of the time when I start drawing on the board, students start laughing. So this way can also create a kind of fun in classroom, and this is also good. So drawing is another way to present vocabulary and help learners learn and remember, okay? All right, number 5, we can say body language, okay? Body language, all right? Miming, using gestures, for example, all right? So, for example, if you are doing this or if you show them this gesture, this means that you mean a mobile phone, for example, or a phone call, for example, as a collocation, right? If you perhaps use this, means perhaps playing violin or violin, this is guitar. If you do this, means that you mean a remote control, etc. This way can also create a kind of fun in the classroom, and this is good for learners to remember and learn, all right? There are some other ways or other techniques that you can also resort to as a teacher is what we call translation or definitions. Okay, you give a definition to words. I can personally consider them as techniques to help learners learn the words when they don't understand the meaning of the word, right? Especially translation. Translation is the last solution when you have problem with time constraint or when you are dealing with abstract words, okay? So words that you cannot find a picture of or words that you cannot use realia for, etc. So when you don't have any other solution and you need learners to know the word and you have problem with time, for example, you can resort to translation, and it is better not to translate it yourself as a teacher, but you can ask someone, a student or a learner, to translate it if you know that some of the learners know the word, okay? So this is a better way to save time, okay? To save time, all right? So when you present vocabulary using one of these ways, for sure you need to know whether your learners understood or still remember the terms or the words you presented. And this is something that you can do by what we call concept checking. Okay, concept checking. So concept checking, we can consider it as a way or as a form of assessment to assess, to check whether learners learned or still remember the words. So we have a lot of ways to concept check. Okay, to concept check, for example, you can erase the words you presented and you ask them, or you elicit the words you presented and you check whether students still remember the words. You can also erase the word and show them the pictures. You show them again the pictures and see whether students still remember. You can also ask students to give you sentences, or you can ask them questions, for instance. So these are examples of ways that you can use to concept check, which means to check and see whether student learned these terms or not. So as you can see, these are only ways of presenting it. Perhaps in the upcoming episodes we are going to talk about steps and stages to follow in teaching vocabulary, and as you can see, this is stage number 1 in a vocabulary lesson, presenting. Okay, see you in another episode. Have a good time and goodbye.